Welcome students, welcome to this presentation on purchasing power parity theory. In this presentation, I shall give you a brief introduction to the paper currency standard and then take you through the purchasing power parity theory, which is used to explain the exchange rate determination between two currencies when both the currencies are on inconvertible paper currency standard. Money. One of the greatest invention of mankind is the invention of money. And this concept of money has undergone through several changes in its long history. It was used as metals at one time, gold and silver were used as metal. Then in course of its usage, it was found that it was difficult to carry gold from one place to the other. Either it would get lost or it would be robbed, or even it would get debased. That means particles of gold would chip away during its course of usage. So all these led again to the evolution that why use gold for day-to-day transactions? Why don't gold be kept as a reserve and paper currency come into being? So this was also done in course of its long history. Early days, we find that the paper currency were written in handwritten. They were in some form of a document. They were considered document. Then slowly we find that they were in the form of banknotes, then paper currency, and today, of course, the world over we use paper currency in its the mode that we see to carry on our day-to-day transactions. On the right is an image about the considered to be the first paper currency of the world. Now let's look at the history of paper currency itself. Now the first banknote that we know of was a type of an instrument that was used in China in the 7th century, 806 AD. Later, we find that this Bank of Sweden, which is the oldest central bank in the world, issued notes in 1661. Then the earliest cash notes were completely handwritten. We find that these printed notes came into regular usage sometime between 1696 and 1699. The Bank of England was the first to issue a £10 note in 1759. Even today, pound circulates as a currency, and this was that was also a time when there were severe shortages of gold to give gold exchange or gold representative paper money. The Bank of England also had the partial monopoly of note issue those days. Now, gold standard itself, the paper currency standard itself, there are two variants. One was known as the representative paper money. Now, under the representative paper money, this actually evolved just to overcome the problems of putting gold into actual circulation. So, what happened was gold coins were taken away from circulation, and instead paper currency was put into circulation. But gold was kept in the government mint. So, when the representative paper money was there, that means the gold was kept there, but a representation of the gold was put into circulation to overcome the difficulties that were encountered in using gold. And the currency notes could be exchanged for gold from the government mint. That we saw under the gold standard. The previous video explained this process of exchanging gold currency for gold. Now, representative paper money is found nowhere in the world today. It's a part of history. The second form of paper currency standard is called the inconvertible paper currency standard. In the inconvertible paper currency standard, money is made of paper or of some cheap metal and put into circulation. The face value of the money is greater than the intrinsic value of the money. Now, there are two concepts here, face value and intrinsic value. When we talk about face value, we mean the purchasing power of that particular currency. And then the intrinsic value is the metal value or the material, the commodity value of that commodity which has been used to make that currency. For example, if a 5 rupee note that is in circulation in India now, if we take it, we can purchase goods worth 5 rupees. But if we melt that 5 rupee coin, then the metal value of that coin may not be will not be equal to 5 rupees. It should be much less than that. Now, the purchasing power of money is not maintained in with on par with gold or any other commodity. Under the inconvertible paper currency, it cannot be converted into any metal that like gold or silver or any other thing. It has no exchange value at all. These currencies or this paper note is in circulation only because it has a government promise. It is a government promissory note, and there is a seal of the government. These kind of notes are known as fiat currency, and these paper notes have got unlimited legal tender value. That means any amount of transactions, any amount of debt obligations can be carried on by using paper currency standard. These paper currencies today are not linked, one country's currency is not linked to another country's currency. Each nation has got its own national currency. The problem comes in only when we need to exchange one currency to the other. So we need to understand how the exchange rate is determined between one currency and the other currency when both the countries are on inconvertible paper currency standard. India's monetary system. Prior to the British, we had different kingdoms, and each kingdom had their own currencies and coins that were put into circulation. Once the British came into India, invaded India, they they passed a paper currency act in 1861. Once this 1861 act was passed, there was only one kind of currency throughout the country, and this gave the government of India the power, the monopoly power to issue currency notes. At the time of independence, the Indian rupee was linked to the pound sterling, and the value of 1 pound was equal to 13 rupees point 33 paise. That was the value of 1 pound in terms of rupee at that time. Then we find that in 1927 there was the Hilton Young Commission, which recommended that India adopt the proportional reserve system. Under the proportional reserve system, for every currency that was to be printed, it would have to keep 40% in terms of reserve, in terms of gold, and 60% had to be kept in terms of securities and government securities and commercial bills. This system was in vogue till 1956. So that means for every 1 rupee that is printed, 40 paise worth of gold should be there with the government reserve, and 60% should be kept as a reserve of foreign securities and currencies and domestic bills. Now, these were the currencies that were in circulation in India at that time. And India continued with the proportional reserve system that was started after the Hilton Young Commission, and India continued it till 1956. By 1956, India had completed one 5-year plan and the economy was growing, and it was not possible for India to increase the supply of gold for every note that was being circulated in the country. So, India gave up the proportional reserve system and opted what came to be known as the minimum reserve system. Many of us may be thinking that for every note that is in circulation, we have gold reserves kept by the government. No, there are no gold reserves kept for the notes that are being circulated in the country now, because we follow what is called as the minimum reserve system. In the minimum reserve system, the by law at that time, after 1956, it was decided that 200 crore rupees, 200 crore worth of assets should be kept as a reserve for the notes that are going to be printed by the government of India. Of this 200 crores, 115 crore has to be in the form of gold, and 85 crore worth of currencies or government securities had to be kept. Now, this is just a number that is kept by the government. Now, this was done in 1956, it holds good now. But after that, the economy has grown many-fold from 1956 to now, and the increase, there has, as economies grow, there is a need for increased amount of paper currency for carrying out the day-to-day transaction. So the amount of paper currency today is far, far greater than the 200 crore which has been kept as a minimum reserve system. That's a system. Beyond that, it has no meaning. The paper currencies that are in circulation today are circulating only only because it is a fiat currency, it is supported by the government. So once the government ceases its lending its support to the currency, that currency will have no value at all. Now, having understood the evolution of paper currency, then seeing the two kinds of paper currency, which is representative paper money and inconvertible paper currency standard. Now, the question comes, how do we determine the rate of exchange between two currencies when both the countries are on inconvertible paper currency standard? Today, all countries of the world are on inconvertible paper currency standard. So this problem did come up, and Whitley in 1802 had suggested something about exchange purchasing power of the currency, but it was not developed fully. It came on to Gustav Cassel in 1921 to develop and present it as a full theory, and it was given the name of purchasing power parity theory. This purchasing power parity theory explains the determination of exchange rate between two currencies on inconvertible paper currency standard, and it also explains the fluctuations in the exchange rate when the countries experience inflation or deflation in their respective countries. The purchasing power parity theory is an operational theory, and it has got two important propositions. The first proposition is that monetary factors are the long run determinants of the exchange rate among two currencies when currencies are under flexible exchange rate system. Then the second set of determinants that are necessary to understand the exchange rate determination are trade related factors, which are like tariffs, the transport cost, and capital flows. So these two factors will influence the exchange rate of the respective currencies. There are two versions of the purchasing power parity theory. The first one is called the absolute purchasing power parity theory. Now, what is in that? In here, what we are understanding is the respective purchasing power of the two independent currencies. Now, this means, let me take a simple example. These numbers have no more meaning than using it for understanding the concept. One set of goods can be purchased in India by paying rupees 5,000, and a similar set of goods can be purchased for $1,000 in the USA. So that means that the purchasing power of 5,000 in India is equal to 1,000 of the US dollars. That's simple thing. Or we can say the purchasing power of $1 is 5 rupees. So $1 is equal to 5 rupees because we are considering the purchasing power of the currencies in the respective countries for a similar set of goods. So this is how we are understanding the exchange rate under the absolute version of the PPP version. And in the relative version, we consider the rate of inflation to determine the exchange rate. Now, what does that mean? If India and USA are the two countries, and assume that $1 is equal to 70 rupees because of the purchasing power which we have understood. Now assume that India is experiencing inflation. If India is experiencing inflation, this $1 will not be equal to 70 rupees. It may go up to 72 or 73 rupees. What does that mean? It means that earlier in the foreign exchange market, we were able to buy $1 worth by paying 70 Indian rupees. Now we will not be able to buy $1 by paying 70 rupees because the domestic value of the currency has depreciated. It was earlier 70. Now the value of the price level has gone up, and therefore the price has gone up from 70 rupees to 75 rupees or 73 rupees. Let's look at the relative version of the purchasing power parity theory. This relative version of the purchasing power parity theory takes the inflation into consideration. The exchange rate between the two currencies are now influenced by the inflation rate that occurs in one of the two countries or in both of the countries. In both of the countries. Now, when inflation takes place, we know by understanding the theory of inflation that whenever there is an inflation, the price level will rise and the value of the currency will fall, or the purchasing power of the currency will fall. So these are things that we know from macroeconomics. Now, what we understand here, $1 is equal, let us take this example, $1 is equal to 70 Indian rupees. That's the same purchasing power parity, and we found that it was 1 is to 70. This is just a number for the sake of convenience to understand the idea. Then, India is experiencing inflation. If India experiences inflation, then this 70 rupees that we were paying has now become 75. The price level in the market has increased, and therefore the goods that were available for 70 rupees is now available only for 75 rupees. There is an increase in the price level by 5 point, give a number like 5 percentage point, the price has increased. Now, because the price of goods in India has increased, it means the purchasing power of the currency has fallen. The currency has fallen in the domestic economy. Now, if it has fallen in the domestic economy, now we can relate it to the external economy or to the American dollar. So earlier we were paying 70 rupees to buy $1 American worth of goods or in the foreign exchange market. Now, instead of paying 70 rupees in the foreign exchange market to buy $1, we will have to pay 73 rupees, example, to buy one for dollar. Now, if we have to pay 73 rupees, that means the dollar has become costly when compared to the Indian rupee. So this 3 rupees extra that we are going to pay is a result of the inflation that has occurred in the economy. Now that means the value of Indian rupee has depreciated vis-a-vis the American dollar. Do not mistake that the number has increased from 70 to 73, therefore the value of the rupee has increased. The value of the rupee has not increased, the value of the rupee has actually come down, because earlier we were paying only 70 rupees, now we have to pay 3 rupees extra. That means the dollar has become costlier by 3 rupees. So that's how the thing can be understood. Now, when we are taking inflation into consideration, there can be different conditions of inflation. In the first example that I told you, only India is experiencing inflation and the USA is not experiencing inflation. So the Indian rupee depreciates and American rupee appreciates vis-a-vis the Indian rupee. The second situation can be both the countries are having inflation. Now, if both the countries are having inflation, it depends what is the rate of inflation in both the countries. Whichever country's inflation rate is higher than the other country, that country's currency will depreciate by that amount by the percentage change in the thing. Suppose both the countries have inflation almost at the same level, then what will happen is the exchange rate will fluctuate in the market to find its own level and stabilize itself at a new point, because that is where the inflation rate of both the currencies have been taken into consideration. The fluctuations that will happen in this currency exchange market. We understood that the exchange market, the rate of inflation was influencing the exchange rate. Now, under the gold standard, we found that if there was too much of demand for a currency, then that value of the currency would go up. And the gold standard had an automatic system by permitting the outflow of gold, which would reduce the demand for that other currency, and the exchange rate would come back to its equilibrium. So that was automatic under the gold standard. Now that doesn't happen so in the case of inconvertible paper currency standard. Here there is some movement that takes place. That movement happens in the form of commodities. What will happen now? I gave you an example where the dollar was $1 was equal to 70 rupees. Now, when India experienced 70 rupees rising to 73 rupees, what will be the repercussion of this change in 3 rupees to India, and what will be the repercussion of the 3 rupees to the USA in terms of trade flows between the two countries? Let's take that simple logic here. What will India like to do with importing from USA? Obviously, India will not like to import from USA, because for every import it has to pay 3 rupees more, which means the import from USA will reduce now into the country, which means that the export from the USA to India will actually reduce. On the other hand, what will happen to the USA importing goods from India? Earlier, USA was able to import 70 rupees worth of goods Now USA is able to import 73 rupees worth of goods. So what USA would do is USA would be happy to import more from India. So imports from India will increase in USA. Exports to USA will increase from India. So two things that have happened. One, India's imports have reduced, and USA's exports have increased. Then the other side from export, India's exports have increased because India's goods are cheaper, and USA's exports to India will reduce because US goods have become costlier. So just by the movement of goods between the two countries, because of the inflation in the domestic economies, the exchange rate is expected to find a new level of equilibrium. So this increase and decrease of import or movement of goods between the two countries is known as commodity flows. So by these commodity flows, we understand that the exchange rate would come back to some stable equilibrium or some equilibrium position, and find its own level in the international market. So the fluctuations in the exchange rate between two countries on inconvertible paper currency standard can be explained with the help of movement of commodities, which is expressed in terms of export of commodities or import of commodities by the respective countries, which is an effect of the change in the currency value due to inflation. Thus, the ability or to use currency to purchase goods and services in a country is a foundation of the purchasing power parity. What is ultimately the purchasing power parity? What is the ability of the currency to buy goods and services in their respective countries? Then compare it. We also hear sometimes about the burger exchange rate. Now, this the colloquial usage. So, what does a burger with a standard filling cost in USA? What does the standard filling cost in USA? So we can say that one burger costs 70 there in India, and the same burger will cost about $1 here. No, that's just a way to understand how this currency exchange rate can be explained in terms of purchasing power. So I hope you have found this informative, and this is a subject which has almost been done away with most of the universities. But it is very necessary to understand the current equilibrium rates and the current demand supply theory. It is important to understand the purchasing power parity theory. As a student of economics, we don't miss steps when we learn. We learn things in a sequence so that we can understand how it has logically moved from one idea to the other. Thank you very much for watching this video till the end. Please do subscribe to the video if you haven't yet subscribed, and watch the earlier videos on international economics, for which the descriptions I will give it in the links I will give it in the description box. So please comment on the video, and you can also share with me in the comment box other topics that you may like to watch as a video so that I could develop them for you. Thank you very much.